Imagine waking up tomorrow to news alerts flooding your phone. World War III has officially started. China's invading Taiwan. Russia is pushing deeper into Europe, and missiles are lighting up the night sky across 3 continents. But here's the twist that changes absolutely everything. The United States just announced it's sitting this one out. No troops deploying overseas, no carrier groups steaming toward conflict zones, no American jets scrambling to defend allies. Just nothing. The world's most powerful military, the backbone of NATO, the security guarantor for half the planet, is staying home. And honestly, the consequences are so catastrophic, so utterly world-changing, that what follows might be the darkest timeline humanity has ever faced. Because when America stays neutral in World War III, the entire global order doesn't just crack, it completely shatters. Let's set the stage for how we even get here. It's 2026, and tensions have been building for years. A new American president, elected on an aggressive isolationist platform, has been withdrawing from international commitments left and right. Think Fortress America on steroids. The campaign literally promised to bring every single troop home and let other countries handle their own problems. NATO's been on life support for months, with the US refusing to affirm Article 5 commitments. And then it happens. China launches a full-scale invasion of Taiwan in the early morning hours of a Tuesday. Simultaneously, Russia, emboldened by American disengagement, rolls tanks across the Polish border and into the Baltics. Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz and attacks Saudi oil facilities. North Korea shells Seoul. It's coordinated, it's massive, and it's clearly been planned for exactly this moment when America's checked out. The president goes on TV that evening, and the speech is insane. Real talk. Historians will debate this moment for centuries. The message is crystal clear. America will defend its own territory and nothing else. Our allies are on their own. We're not risking American lives for foreign entanglements. The justification talks about war fatigue, about America's own problems needing attention, about how we've spent trillions defending other countries who don't appreciate it. And just like that, 75 years of American-led global security architecture evaporates overnight. The world as we know it is over. Now here's where things get absolutely wild. Within 48 hours of the American Neutrality Declaration, Taiwan falls. No joke, the island literally cannot hold out against a full Chinese assault without American intervention. The Taiwanese military fights incredibly bravely, sure, but they're facing the full might of the People's Liberation Army with no cavalry coming over the hill. Chinese amphibious forces, supported by overwhelming air superiority, establish beachheads on the western coast. Taipei is surrounded within a week. The Taiwanese government either surrenders or flees into exile, probably ending up in Japan if they're lucky. The semiconductor facilities that produce over 60% of the world's advanced chips, they're either destroyed in the fighting or captured intact by China, which honestly might be even worse for the rest of the world. We're talking about China suddenly controlling the technological choke point of the 21st century. But here's the thing that makes this scenario so much darker than you'd think. Japan, South Korea, and Australia are watching this unfold in absolute horror. These countries have built their entire defense strategies around the assumption that America has their back. The US-Japan Security Treaty, the alliance with South Korea, the partnership with Australia, all of it was predicated on American commitment. Now that's gone. So what do? They've got to make impossible choices, and fast. Japan starts emergency consultations about developing nuclear weapons, something that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. South Korea is looking at potentially negotiating with North Korea from a position of sudden weakness. Australia is effectively isolated in the Pacific, surrounded by an expanding Chinese sphere of influence with no great power backing. Meanwhile, in Europe, the situation is somehow even more catastrophic. Russian forces are pouring across the border into Poland and the Baltic states. NATO tries to respond, but without American military might, it's honestly kind of a paper tiger. Look, European militaries are professional and capable, but they've been underfunded for decades, specifically because they relied on American power projection. Germany's army is critically short of everything from ammunition to spare parts. France and the UK have serious militaries for sure, but they can't be everywhere at once. The Poles fight like absolute lions, no question, but they're being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Russian artillery is devastating defensive positions, and without American air power to establish superiority, European jets are struggling to even contest the airspace. Here's what's seriously messed up. Within 2 weeks, Russian forces have captured Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn. The Baltic capitals have fallen. Polish defenses are crumbling as Russian mechanized divisions push toward Warsaw. Belarus, fully aligned with Russia, has opened its borders to allow a northern thrust that's now threatening the Polish capital from multiple directions. European leaders are holding emergency meetings literally around the clock, but the military reality is becoming undeniable. Without American logistics, without American intelligence capabilities, without American firepower, they're losing, and losing badly. NATO's facing an existential crisis in real time. The alliance was built on collective defense, but that required the US as the backbone. Now, some members are straight up questioning whether continued resistance makes sense or if they should seek separate peace deals with Russia. Hungary openly breaks ranks and declares neutrality. Turkey starts making overtures to Russia about spheres of influence. The alliance is fragmenting under pressure, and there's no American leadership to hold it together. It's low-key every nation for themselves, which is exactly what the post-World War II order was designed to prevent. The economic shockwaves are absolutely devastating, and this is where regular people everywhere start feeling the impact. Global stock markets don't just crash, they go into complete freefall. We're talking Black Monday times 10. The Dow drops 40% in a week. Markets in Asia and Europe are even worse. See, the entire global economy was built on the assumption of American guaranteed stability and freedom of navigation. Now that's gone, and international trade is seizing up like an engine without oil. Shipping insurance rates skyrocket because nobody knows if their container ships will make it through contested waters. Energy prices go absolutely ballistic as Middle Eastern oil supplies become uncertain, and Russian gas supplies to Europe are weaponized even more aggressively. Here's something you probably wouldn't expect. The US dollar, even with America staying neutral, initially surges as a safe haven. People are desperately trying to get their money out of war zones and into something stable. But then, and this is where it gets really interesting, countries around the world start questioning why they're still using dollars for trade when America's abandoned its global commitments. China accelerates its yuan internationalization project like crazy. Russia, Iran, and other countries rapidly expand their non-dollar trading systems. The petrodollar system that's underpinned American economic power since the 1970s starts to genuinely unravel. Within months, the dollar's global reserve currency status is seriously threatened for the first time since World War II. Back in Asia, China's not just stopping with Taiwan. With American neutrality confirmed and the regional order collapsed, Beijing moves to consolidate its position aggressively. The South China Sea becomes a Chinese lake, literally. Those artificial islands China built, they're now fully militarized, forward operating bases, and nobody's challenging them. Chinese Coast Guard and naval vessels are enforcing exclusive economic zones that encompass basically the entire sea. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, they're all being pushed out of waters they've fished for generations. The 9-dash line isn't a claim anymore, it's enforced reality. Japan's facing a nightmare scenario. Chinese aircraft and naval vessels are regularly violating Japanese territorial waters and airspace, and there's not much Tokyo can do about it. The Senkaku Islands, which have been a flashpoint for years, are seized by Chinese forces in a quick operation. Japan protests, but protests don't matter anymore. Military force matters, and without American backing, Japan doesn't have the capability to take them back. This triggers the most serious domestic crisis in Japan since World War II. The government that failed to protect Japanese territory falls in a no-confidence vote. The new government that comes in is talking seriously about nuclear weapons development, about massively expanding the military, about fundamentally rewriting the pacifist constitution. We're watching Japanese remilitarization happen in fast forward, and honestly, given the region's history, that's making everyone nervous, including Japan's other neighbors. South Korea is in an impossible position. They've got North Korea to the north, now emboldened and aggressive, and they've lost their American security guarantee. The THAAD missile defense systems are still there, but without American support and intelligence, they're way less effective. North Korea starts making aggressive moves across the DMZ, testing defenses, launching more missiles. Seoul's within artillery range of the border, which has always been true, But now there's no American deterrent preventing Kim Jong-un from actually using that artillery. South Korean leaders are facing the worst choice imaginable. Do they negotiate from weakness with the North? Do they seek some kind of accommodation with China? Or do they try to go it alone and risk everything? The Middle East predictably explodes into chaos. Iran, seeing American neutrality, goes all in on regional dominance. Iranian-backed militias intensify operations across Iraq and Syria. Hezbollah launches major attacks into Israel from Lebanon. The Houthis in Yemen escalate attacks on Saudi Arabia. And here's the thing. Saudi Arabia and Israel, despite their differences, both relied heavily on American support. Now they're having to make desperate calculations about whether to strike Iran preemptively before Iran can consolidate its position. The Gulf states are low-key panicking because their entire security model was based on American protection. Israel's probably in the most precarious position it's been since 1948. Surrounded by hostile actors facing a potentially nuclear Iran without American backing, Israeli leadership is making calculations that are honestly terrifying to contemplate. There are very credible reports that the Israeli Air Force conducts a massive strike on Iranian nuclear facilities, using basically everything in their arsenal because they figure it's now or never. The strike damages but doesn't destroy Iran's nuclear program, and the retaliation is severe. Iranian missiles rain down on Israeli cities. Hezbollah launches thousands of rockets from Lebanon. Israeli society is under attack from multiple directions, and there's no American resupply of interceptor missiles, no American diplomatic cover at the UN, nothing. The humanitarian catastrophes are unfolding on a scale that's genuinely hard to comprehend. Millions of refugees are fleeing war zones in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. But here's the brutal reality. There's nowhere for them to go. Europe's being invaded, so they can't absorb refugees. Asian countries are dealing with their own security crises. The Middle East is in chaos. Traditional refugee resettlement programs that relied on American participation and funding are non-functional. We're talking about refugee flows that make the Syrian crisis look small by comparison. And there's no international system to handle it because the American-backed international order has collapsed. Inside the United States, which remember is sitting all this out, society is tearing itself apart. Public opinion is massively divided in ways that make current political divisions look tame. Roughly half the country supports the neutrality policy, arguing that America's finally putting its own interests first and avoiding entangling alliances that have cost trillions and thousands of lives. The other half is absolutely furious, arguing that America's abandoning its moral obligations, destroying decades of carefully built alliances, and ultimately making itself less safe by allowing hostile powers to dominate entire regions. Protests and counter-protests are happening in every major city. There are credible reports of violence between pro-interventionist and pro-neutrality groups. Military leaders are resigning in protest at unprecedented rates. Multiple generals and admirals go public with their opposition to the neutrality policy, arguing it's a betrayal of American allies and undermines every commitment the U.S. has made since World War II. But constitutionally, the president is the commander-in-chief, and Congress is too divided to override the policy. America's military-industrial complex is still churning out weapons and equipment, but it's all staying in America or being sold commercially to whoever can pay, which creates its own dystopian dynamic of wars being fueled by American weapons without American strategy or restraint. Here's something that's wild to consider. American tech companies are in an impossible position. Silicon Valley's products and platforms have been used to coordinate resistance movements, share intelligence, and organize defenses against aggression. But those companies still want access to Chinese markets, Russian resources, and European consumers. They're being pressured from all sides. Some choose to restrict their services in authoritarian countries, tanking their stock prices but maintaining some ethical position. Others decide to cooperate with authoritarian demands, leading to massive backlash domestically. American soft power, which was always a huge part of the country's global influence, is just evaporating because nobody trusts American commitment to anything anymore. 6 months into this scenario, the world map has been redrawn in ways that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Russia controls the Baltic states and significant portions of Poland. Ukrainian territory that wasn't already under Russian control has been further occupied. China controls Taiwan and dominates the entire Western Pacific. Japan and South Korea are negotiating some kind of accommodation with Chinese regional hegemony because they literally have no other choice. The Middle East is in multi-sided warfare with Iran ascendant. Europe's in crisis, economically devastated and militarily defeated in the East, struggling to absorb what's happened and figure out what comes next. The global economy is in depression, not recession. International trade has contracted by 40%. Supply chains that took decades to build are completely disrupted. Countries are hoarding food and energy resources, leading to shortages everywhere. Technological development has slowed dramatically because the international scientific cooperation that drove innovation has collapsed along with everything else. Medical supply chains are broken, leading to shortages of essential medicines globally. It's honestly like someone took the globalized world of the early 21st century and just smashed it to pieces. And here's maybe the darkest part. Nuclear proliferation is accelerating like crazy. Japan announces it's developing nuclear weapons within a year. South Korea follows immediately after. Saudi Arabia, facing an ascendant Iran, apparently acquires nuclear weapons from Pakistan, which has always been rumored but now becomes open reality. Turkey announces a nuclear program. Poland and other Eastern European countries start talking about it. The non-proliferation regime that prevented nuclear weapons spread for decades is just gone. Within a few years, we're potentially looking at a world with 30 or 40 nuclear-armed nations instead of 9. The chances of nuclear weapons actually being used, whether deliberately or accidentally, go up exponentially. America's not safer in this scenario, by the way. That's the cruel irony of the whole thing. The economy's suffering from global depression and loss of dollar dominance. American businesses that depended on international markets are failing. Unemployment spikes. The vaunted safety of isolation turns out to be an illusion because the United States was deeply integrated into global systems that are now broken. Hostile powers control huge swaths of territory and resources. China's technological dominance, from capturing Taiwan's semiconductor industry, means American tech companies are dependent on a hostile power for critical components. Russian control of European territory means traditional allies are either subjugated or fundamentally weakened. The Monroe Doctrine might keep the Western Hemisphere secure, but that's cold comfort when the rest of the world has descended into chaos, and American global influence is effectively zero. Future generations would look back at this moment as the inflection point where American-led globalization ended and something much darker began. Regional hegemonic powers dividing the world into spheres of influence. Constant proxy conflicts along the boundaries of these spheres. Nuclear brinksmanship becoming routine rather than exceptional. International law meaning basically nothing, because there's no powerful enforcer. The liberal international order that, for all its flaws, have prevented great power war for 75 years, would be studied in history books as a temporary aberration between eras of imperial competition and conflict. The human cost is almost impossible to calculate. Millions dead in the conflicts across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Tens of millions displaced as refugees with nowhere to go. Hundreds of millions facing poverty and hunger from economic collapse and disrupted food systems. Countries using food and energy as weapons, leading to famines not seen since the 20th century. Medical care collapsing in war zones, leading to preventable deaths from disease and injury. The psychological trauma of entire generations growing up in warfare and chaos. It's genuinely apocalyptic in scope. So, real talk, what does this scenario actually tell us? It reveals just how much the post-World War II order depended on American commitment, for better or worse. That order wasn't perfect. It involved plenty of American interventions that were mistakes or worse, but it did provide a framework that prevented great power wars and enabled unprecedented global prosperity and development. The alternative, as this scenario shows, isn't some peaceful multipolar world where regional powers coexist harmoniously. It's imperial competition, spheres of influence, constant conflict, economic fragmentation, and human suffering on a massive scale. American neutrality in World War III doesn't lead to American safety and prosperity in isolation. It leads to a darker, more dangerous, more impoverished world where America itself is ultimately weaker and less secure, surrounded by hostile hegemonic powers and cut off from the global systems that made American prosperity possible in the first place. Sometimes the worst thing you can do is nothing at all.